Today we are going to talk about snare drums. Well, snare drum. Here's the concept. I was talking to somebody about a week ago that was asking me, they only had one snare. And they're like, how can you, without always changing heads, how can you do some like little tweaks and whatnot to get different tones for songs? It's like, okay, my snare sounds great on this, but we do this other song, it doesn't sound good. And in lieu of going and buying a bunch of heads, because that's one way. Obviously, you could have your Ambassador, your Emperors, you could have your control sounds, you've got your Genera Dries, you've got your G2s. There's all sorts of different heads that will obviously change the tone of the snare, which is great if you want to go buy those and take the time. But if you just have one snare and you don't have a bunch of heads, there's still ways to manipulate that snare to get different sounds. And that's what we want to go over today. We're going to use a few different things. We're going to use we got some moon gel, which to me, moon gel, gaff tape ultimately kind of do the same kind of thing. Moon gel's great because it's easy, but that stuff also disappears. That's why we always have rolls of gaff tape around, because sometimes you just stick a piece of tape on it, great. Sometimes it's little tape with some toilet paper under it, whatever. Then we have some homemade stuff. This is a homemade one of mine that works really well, that gets a sound. We have a couple different big fat snare drums, one with a hole in it. We've got one without a hole, homemade O-ring. We're going to go through all this stuff and just see how it changes it. So we're not going to change heads. We're actually not going to change the tuning either. That's going to be, the first thing we're going to do is just the drum, which you heard Hal playing, is wide open. No muffling, ring, the whole 9 yards. That is our control sound, not the head. This is actually an Ambassador, but that sound is our control sound. That is what we're using as a bass.
Control sound.
Yeah. So we're going to work out from being really ringy and totally wide open to different sorts of dampening without changing the tuning. Again, this is only one way of doing it. We could change tuning, you got your heads, all of that stuff, but we're going to keep one tuning, one snare drum, and then see what happens with a track. We have a track we're going to play to. It's short, it's about 35 seconds with a couple different parts. So we'll hear each one of these sounds in some sort of musical context and how much they change. Some will sound good, some might not sound so good, some will depend on what your personal preference is, and that's cool. But they'll all have an effect on the actual song. So what I want to do first, we've already heard this, but I'm going to go in the control room. Let's go ahead and run through what we have here, and then we'll start piling on our different muffling and, covering techniques here. All right, cool. All right, so first off, let's do this. Let's, Hal, just play a groove, man. All right, cool. The setup we have today is pretty simple. We have an Audio-Technica ATM 250 in the kick. We have a 4050 stereo for the overheads, ATM 450 on the hi-hat, a A3000 on the floor, and the snare, top and bottom, we just went 57s. So first off, this snare, Canopus 6x14 maple. 6.5 by 14 maple with 8 ply. It has a Remo Ambassador. We have no muffling on it. Just give me some snare hits. It's got a ring. It's not horrible, actually. And one thing with the ring is it's easy for us sometimes in, say, a rock thing to dry that ring up completely because maybe, oh man, it's too much ring, get rid of it. Oh, it sounds great without the ring. And then we go to play the track and the snare drum can sometimes sound small without some of that life because that life, that ring, that decay, a lot of the times, especially in rock, and especially if you have pan guitars or stuff like that, that ring will get eaten up by the context of the tune, and if we take that away, we lose some life. However, there's also plenty of times musically, and I think this track today that we're going to use is kind of just a kind of straightforward rockish tune, not a heavy thing at all. And it works with all this, so we'll get a good idea of how the decay in the ring affects the tune or how much of it gets eaten up in context, and then once we dry all that up. So first off, let's do the track with this setup right here. This is our basic setup, and we'll go from there. All right, so that's our basic setup right there. So notice the ring does get a little bit, we lose a little bit of that ring once the track starts, but the drum too, we're not EQing anything and we're not compressing. This is just a 57 over that snare drum. But, you know, it's a 6.5, we should have some body in there, right? But we have a nice ring, so that's our starting point. So first thing, let's go with what we've all used before is moon gel or gaff tape or whatever you have handy, you know, duct tape sometimes too. All right, so here's where we're starting first. So he's got a full piece of moon gel. This is just a small one. But we went from wide open and he's basically setting it right here on the edge of the drum. We're really just trying to tame our ring. Say you get it, you're playing, you're like, man, snare sounds good, maybe you like it, but the ring is a little too much. Towards the edge won't really affect our tone too much, but it will hit the snare. Now take it off. We've got that much longer ring. Now put it back on just on the edge. The tone of the drum doesn't change too much. Actually, in some ways, the mid-range is a little nicer because we don't have as much of that ring, which is pretty pronounced. And that's just one full piece of moon gel right on the edge. Play a groove. Add some ghost notes. All right, now real quick, just so we know where we're at, pull that thing off real fast and just play a couple bars. All right, put it back on. Yeah, see, it just dries that tail up a little bit. All right, hey, let's try this with the track. Cool. Actually, I think that cleans it up a little bit and makes it sit in the track a little nicer. Now, one thing, there's some ghost note talk coming up. I agree with you guys that sometimes some of these mods and things you do will kill ghost notes. And that's a big deal if you're playing a pattern that has ghost notes. However, if you're not doing any ghost notes, it doesn't matter. Again, it all depends on whatever you're doing. And a couple of these things we're going to do are not necessarily good for ghost notes. But then I say that, and you know what? It might work. We'll get there. I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, now let's take that moon gel, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to move this sucker in. Go about like what we did earlier. We're going to go in considerably. So we're going to go about that far in on the drum. Give me some snare. That's a significant change. Pull it off, and just give me some snare. Drop it on. Now it actually sounds like a kind of a different snare drum. It's a big, not necessarily a tone change. Tone's changing a little bit, but we have no ring. Give me a groove now. JJ. Cool. Now, one thing too to note, I'm having Hal play everything center the head today, which means he's really pissed off at me. And see, that setup sounds good with the rim shot too. But I'm doing it so we have it even because some of the things we're going to do in a second don't sound that good rim shot, and I just want an even, consistent way so we know that we're not changing the way we're hitting the head. although that is, or hitting the drum, but that is also another way to manipulate the sound. So today we're going all center of the head. Everything is going to be that way. Yeah. I suggest everybody learn to play that way. There's a cool tones you can get with center of the head and then using rim shots for accents. Okay, track.